Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Superpower Quest Superhumans. And today I have a delightful treat for you, a brother and a friend named Mike Greenwell, known by many names. One of those names is Papa by his grandchildren, and he's a husband of 40 years. Um, he has three daughters and five granddaughters, which means he is surrounded in his life by pink and purple. That's what he just told me before we started. He is also the chairman of an organization called Safe Places for Women, which is a long-term residential community for women coming out of human trafficking. And his identity is lover of lives. And so we're going to dig in with my friend and learn a little bit more. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here. And we had a great get together the first time we talked, and I think there's a common bond there between us. So I'm glad we can sit down and talk today.
There is for sure. Like I've gotten to be with this man in person, so he has a gentle, protective energy about him. You just feel safe and you trust him, and that probably. I mean, he was a police officer for many years, so let's start with the lover of lives. You said that your identity, kind of your the name that encompasses you is lover of lives. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So if I can go back a little bit, so in my 40 years of law enforcement, I didn't know what my true identity was. I knew that that I was supposed to be in law enforcement. That was clear to me that that's where the Lord and everything He created in me since I was a little kid, what was
Yeah.
leading to. I did a stint of student teaching because I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and that went backwards, sideways, anyway but forward. And
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, there's no way I can do that the rest of my life." And I just happened to take a criminal justice class that next semester, and I fell in love with it, and boom, it was the rest was history. So, 40 years I retired, but it's the last 3 years of my career where I learned about who God made me to be specifically. And what I heard 5 years ago was that I was a defender of innocence. And when I look back at my 40-year career, what tore my heart were the people who were victimized, the
Yep.
innocence that was stolen from people, and my internal sense of justice was I felt violated for them. And so that was a lot of my work for the was working and feeling for the victim.
Yep.
Um, so then I retired after 40 years, and I'm like, okay, so what does a defender of innocence do in retirement? And there's a lot of things I could have done, and that hasn't left me.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, I was just sitting down, and I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, what else is there? I know there's more about me. And through a long series of me just listening to the Lord, what I heard was, Mike, you are my lover of lives.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, what does that mean? He said, you love to see people come to fruition of who they were created to be. And I do. I like mentoring. I love, especially taking a young person. I've got several young men right now that I mentor, and I just love to see them learn who they are, who their superpower is, and
Yeah.
and to take that, and man, they just start flying. And I love to sit back, and in a lot of ways I feel like I'm a coach,
Yeah.
but I'm not there every day saying, okay, now do this. It's more of I look at the tape after the game and say, okay, here's some things, and we talk about it, and we talk about fears, we talk about what's holding them back, we talk about trauma that's happened in their life, and how can they get past that trauma to move into who they really are. Because what I've learned over a long time now is that most people operate in fear.
Yeah.
When we operate um, out of violence, or when we're angry, we always want to blame the other person, but that anger always starts internally over something that we're feeling internally.
Yeah.
And from that, then we leash out at those around us. Unfortunately, the people we love the most tend to get that. And so through that, I've learned to help them walk through those fears, those traumas, and basically helping them redeem who they really are and understanding who they are, and to live in that, and to not live in the lies, because it's so easy for us to believe a lie, but it requires faith to believe the truth in who we really are.
Oh man.
So that that is what the Lord has really laid on me, and invariably I'll pray and I'll say, "Hey Lord, who's next? There's somebody else out there that you want me to love. Who is that?" And literally within a matter of hours, I'll get a phone call, a text. I'll be talking with somebody, and they'll know somebody who said, "Hey, this person wants to meet you," and we connect. And yeah, so I've been retired almost 2 years now, and I can honestly say that a lot of people will ask me, "So, Mike, what's next? What are you doing in retirement?" And I've learned over the last probably 4 to 6 months, it's not what I'm doing, it's who I'm walking it with.
Yeah.
And so I've moved away from the what
Yeah.
to the who.
Oh, that's so good, man. There's a lot we could talk about in that, but I think I'm gonna go. I've got a question for you. There's a gentleness about you, right? That I think some people might not associate with a career in law enforcement, right? Because I think there may be pressures in law enforcement to be aggressive at times, or there could be, right? I'm not saying everybody is that way, but I'm saying there, by the nature of the work you're doing and the the harm you're trying to stop in the world, um, you know, it could have made you aggressive or harsh or cynical, right? How did you come by this gentleness um, that
Yeah,
you have?
that's a good but a very deep question.
Yeah,
I so I think the best way to explain it, Johnny, is that in law enforcement there's two kind of mentalities. There's the warrior mentality and there's the guardian mentality. And we have law enforcement officers have to be both. And the guardian is it's that person who's there to help people, to guard people, to to protect them, to sometimes protect them from themselves.
yeah,
But there are times when we have to be that warrior. We have to move out of the, here, the more gentle, let me help you, to no, this is what we got to do here and now. This is an emergency. This is this is where the rubber meets the road for for a lot of people.
yeah,
And so we have to be that warrior, but then you have to be able to come out of that and go back to being that guardian.
yeah,
And I can honestly say that I've always had, as you described it, this gentleness about me. But there's also we also have to learn how to carry this authority with us. And that's, I think, where law enforcement officers go wrong, is that
yeah.
we take this authority to the very top and we're always the authoritarian,
Mm-hmm.
instead of walking in the confidence of who we know we are, who we know what our responsibilities are, who we know what we're capable of, but still walking in a sense of being that guardian, of being that shepherd, of being the person who is there to help. Um, and that's not easy sometimes, but I think my bent is I can be. I'm not saying that I've always been.
Yeah,
I've yelled at my fair share of people.
yeah,
I've fought and wrestled with my fair share of people.
yeah.
They're not things that we ever go out and say that's what we want to go do,
Right.
but you have to go from that guardian to that warrior mentality and back quickly. Sometimes within a matter of seconds.
Yeah,
But you still have to be able to move in it. And so, coming out of retirement, I know that I don't have to carry that authority with me anymore. But I'm
yeah,
still the same person that I was for 40 years in law enforcement.
yeah,
I had to learn a lot along the way. Because if you would ask me 40 years ago the same questions you're asking me now, it wouldn't have been the same. It was more, I'm always out but on this high alert.
yeah,
I'm always walking around ready for action.
Hmm.
But here I am in retirement. So,
Yep.
it is a different world now. I did a year of counseling
Yep.
before I retired, because I wanted to make sure that as I was leaving well, and I wasn't carrying a lot of the burden, a lot of the trauma, the horror that I experienced with
Yep.
me out the door.
Yep.
And counselor did a great job, worked with both my wife and I, and I think she took me to a new level as well.
What was your biggest takeaway during the counseling?
That I held a lot of sorrow
Mm.
in my heart, and um, so one of the things that she walked me through was I had this wall that I was protecting in my mind, and I was adamant that nobody was going to penetrate that wall,
Hmm.
and but I had no idea what was behind that wall or what was inside that wall, and so through her counseling, she got me to basically open up or tear that wall to see what was inside, to just go in it. And once I did, the whole thing just broke open. And what it was, and this, I mean, the Lord shared this with me. I know there's a lot of people out there, well, how do you know it was the Lord? Because it was a very deep, very real, um, spoken word in my heart, even of Mike, all of those are the tears that you wanted to cry but couldn't.
Oh man.
And once those were all washed from me, that wall disappeared, and I could see the beauty that was on the other side of that wall. I could see my family, because when I'm marching in front of that wall in my mind, my family wasn't there. It
Hmm.
was me all alone.
Hmm.
And and once that was gone, I could see my family. I could see the beauty of the rest of the world. I could see the mountains, and I felt free.
Wow.
So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing. The biggest thing that she, for lack of better words, healed me from.
Yep. It's so beautiful. There's somebody listening to this that really needs to hear that, which is interesting. A wall had to come down, and so that wall, was that wall between you and your own sorrow, or was that wall what kept you and your sorrow separated from the world so it didn't spill out on other people? Which one was it?
I would say probably the latter, because I was protecting
Yeah.
my wife and my family and the people around me, so they didn't feel
Yep.
the heaviness, they didn't feel the grief that I was feeling. But I knew that after you went to that child's death and investigated that I couldn't sit and be sorrowful for days. I had to move on. You got to go to the next call. You got to go to do the next thing. And so you got to have somewhere to put that. And so you stuff it inside that wall and you move on. And after 40 years of that, you can't figure out what that wall is. And I always knew there was something was separating me from just total total relationship with my wife. Now, don't misunderstand me. My wife and I had a really good relationship, but I always knew that if she started to approach any of those areas, my hands went up. It was like, nope. And
Mm-hmm.
I could see myself going back in front of that wall,
Yep.
marching back and forth, protecting it. No, I'm not going to allow you to experience that trauma with me.
Man.
So, getting rid of that, and her understanding, I didn't have to go through every situation to get rid of it. It was just, I was
Yep.
able to release it, and my wife understood what it was from. And that's open. After 40 years of marriage,
Mm-hmm.
that's taking us even to a higher level, because I've gotten rid of that wall. For me, it was the wall of the trauma, the bad things that I saw. For some people, it's there's other things, but we do put up walls in our relationships, and unfortunately, sometimes those walls lead to complete separation.
Yep.
And until we get rid of those walls, until we hear the truth about who we believe we are, those walls can't come down, and there's no healing in that.
100%. That's so funny because that just like even that image of the wall. The reason you have the wall is because there's a fear, right? There's a
Right?
fear. You're afraid to let all this grief and trauma come out onto your family. and somehow hurt them.
Right. And the fear was also that I'm protecting my family, but in the cop culture, you got to suck it up.
Yeah.
The mentality of is, you got to be a man. You got to, you can't let this bother you. Well, how many veterans do we have carrying this stuff around
Yeah.
that they experienced in the midst of war, and they're still carrying it, and they have to find somebody, they have to find a way for them to, that you can't just say, I'm going to erase that wall. You got to find somebody, and I'm more than happy to walk through this with anybody,
Yeah.
but you got to find somebody who can help you walk through getting rid of these walls. And my wife and I used to lead a young marrieds group, and one of the things that we would talk about there is every time my wife, or every time a spouse, or every time another person says something to me that I receive as negative, and I say, oh, that must be true, even though it may not be, I take a rock and I put it here. And then another one. And pretty soon, when you start placing those rocks, you get this wall that gets higher and higher. And now we're separating because I want to hide behind that. I want to, even though they're not true.
Yep.
And another way that I like to explain to people is, we take these burdens that we've got and we put them in a backpack, and we carry that backpack with us everywhere we go. And every time something bad happens, every time we hear a negative comment, we get a bad evaluation, we have a fight with somebody, an argument. You know, back when my mom was alive, at 80 years old, her filters kind of left, and she would say things that I could take on as hurtful. I
Yeah.
would have taken a rock, put that in the bag, and carried that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not who we were created to be. You have to know what is the truth. Now, if I am being a jerk to my wife, and that's truth, I need to hear that.
Sure.
But if I take that and my wife says, man, you're being a jerk to me, what's going on with you? I can evaluate that and say, yeah, there is truth into that, and find out what's wrong.
Yeah.
Or I can take that on and say, well, I'm just a jerk.
Yep.
Okay, here goes the rock.
Yeah.
And now, and after years of that, you get tired and you just want to give up. You just want to sit down and stop moving. Again, leads us into separation from the people that we're the closest to.
Man, that's important stuff that you're saying. I've got a microcosm of that happened to me like last night in my house. I'm a creative connector. I'm a listener and a hearer, and I'm gentle, and I love people, and I'm fun loving, and I'm enthusiastic, and I'm quick to smile, right? Like that's who I am when I'm accepted, feeling healthy, feeling loved, feeling safe. That's who I am. But last night my kids were bickering or quarreling, and I swallowed it a couple times and didn't do anything, and then finally I just kind of erupted on them. Like we're watching basketball, and I just kind of erupt, and I'm harsh, and I'm like, you need to stop, and you stop talking, and you know what I mean. Like I start to, and um and my wife, is like, honey, you need to go take a break.
Yeah.
Right? Because the walls came up. Like the walls came up. And what am I afraid of? So I go in my office and I'm like, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid my kids don't respect me. Why are you afraid of that? Well, I'm afraid that if they don't respect me, it means that I'm not respectable. It means that I'm less than. It means that I'm the lowest person on the ladder of the family. It means that I'm nothing. It means that I'm small. And I'm desperately afraid to be small, right? Why are you afraid to be small? Well, possibly because I was bullied, as a child, and made to feel small and dominated and harmed by other people,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so it's like, Johnny, is this what you're really like? Like kind of mean and sharp and harsh, and everybody better do what you say? Like, is that really what you're like, bro? And I'm like, nah, that's not who I am in my heart. That's not who I was created to be, right? Like and so it took me a moment because I was mad.
Yeah.
It took me a moment to get back to being, okay, this is my true identity. This is who I really am, right? Gentle connector, like, and so I got to go out and rectify the damage. But the walls go up when we're afraid of something, right?
Right.
Like that's
Right.
clear.
Yeah. And so if you and I, we're sitting at a table across from each other, my next question to you would be, when's the first time you remember being disrespected, because those wounds can go all the way back
Yeah.
into second, third, fourth, fifth grade, but there was something way back then that impacted you of, I was disrespected, I must be, and you filled in the lie.
Yeah.
You've taken that on. Now you've done work to try to say, that's not who I am. That's not who I am. But until we identify where that lie came from, it's going to sit there and it's going to fester. It's going to boil. And we can pour all the water we want to on it and make it look like it's great. But until we can identify that, I can say the same thing. I can go all the way back, things that my mom said to me back when I was in elementary school.
Yeah.
I've had to say, that's not true. That's
Right.
not true about me. I know she loves me. She didn't do it because she didn't like me. She did it because she wanted to create something in me that meant something for her, not who I was.
Right.
So hopefully one of the things I did well with my girls was, what's their bent? Who did God create them to be? I mean,
Yeah.
I wish I had this stuff 40 years ago before we had kids,
Yeah.
so that I could understand it more. But knowing that today, even they're all in their 30s now, and so but I can look at them today, and I can look at my granddaughters today and say, who did God create them to be? Who does He call them? And now how can I, as their papa, as their dad, how can I help them move in that direction of who they are and help them live that out? I think one of the greatest miscarriages we do is we tell people, oh, this is a good job for you. And we take those personality profiles and say, here's the jobs for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in high school, I had a counselor who I took that, and he said, well, Mike, under this, you could be a teacher, you could be this, you could be that. And police officer was on there.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what about being a police officer? Oh, you don't want to do that because they don't make very much. And that usually requires military experience. And so I took that notion and it was out of my head. So the only thing on the list, my dad was a teacher. So, okay, I guess I'll be a teacher.
Yeah.
I would have rather rammed into a marble wall at 50 miles an hour than been a teacher my whole life. Nothing against teachers. I love teachers. My dad was one, and we've got a ton of friends that are. It takes a special gift to be a teacher. My daughter is a school counselor for junior high kids. Bless her. She's got the personality to do that. Not something I could do. Not something I was created to do.
Yeah.
But in that, if we had counselors that said, "Well, let's find out who you are. Who, what's your bent? What are the things that you were created to be? Now let's find jobs that applies to." That's what we need to find in people.
Yeah. Seriously, man. Yeah. And it takes a very gentle touch because
Yeah,
you don't want
absolutely.
to just, obliterate channels or roads that they might want to take, right?
Right.
If not for your words canceling that out for them. Um, so speaking of the way you're bent, so you took my Superpower Quest assessment, and you came out. So your core drive is progress. So you want forward motion. You don't want to be still. Like you want to see movement and benefit and good things happen. You're going to push for that.
Right.
Um, then you put your primary hero type as leader. So leaders like to be in charge, provide decisive direction to keep everyone effective and on track. That's pretty similar to the 6 types of working genius designation of the galvanizer. Galvanizer it assembles people, make really good coaches, right?
Yeah.
Because they
Right.
can they can motivate and move people in the right direction and don't mind confrontation. Leader usually can handle
Right.
that.
Right.
And then your second is organizer. So the organizer also is directional, right? Because there's vision, which is more the dreamer and the connector. There's direction, which is like the leader and the organizer, and there's execution, which is the achiever and the nurturer. You're more in that middle realm of providing direction. So again, and the organizer is systems. So I can create systems or plans in order to make sure things are done and done efficiently. Your type, leader organizer, that can roll over people, right? Can
Absolutely.
roll over people, if it skews towards the negative. But like I said, there's a gentleness with you. Now, would you say now this is more advice for other people that are like the leader or the organizer or both, who maybe get feedback frequently that they roll over people, or maybe they know in their own selves. I have a tendency to kind of be overbearing. How 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 do how do we achieve that gentleness? If
Unfortunately, there's a lot of trial and error,
Yeah,
and sometimes we have to go back to people and apologize for the way we treated them. I
yeah,
believe that a good leader is able to do that. When you recognize that maybe you said some things that were too harsh, or instead of giving somebody a structure to help them build up and do better,
yeah,
it tore them down and didn't do the part of building them up. One of the things when I would get my feedback from the people under me, I retired as a commander,
yeah,
and so what the people under me, how they saw me was important. I didn't change a lot of things because of that, but I wanted to know, am I being effective in what we're doing?
yeah,
And so, I think one of the good criticisms, it wasn't good, but it helped me, was that my expectations of people were so high that there's no way I can achieve it, so they just give up, or they don't
yeah,
they don't try as hard. So to them, mediocre work was okay because they know they're never going to reach that pinnacle. They're never going to achieve it.
yeah,
And so I had to take a good look at myself and say, okay, I know what I want to achieve, and it's way up here.
yeah,
But to have everybody else have the vision, have the fortitude, have the expertise to get us there, I may need to come down here and say, okay, here's our next achievement level,
yes,
and get them to move to that and do it incrementally, instead of saying, we're going to go from 0 to 3,000 in 2 days. You know, that's just, that's not doable for a lot of people.
yeah,
And it wasn't even doable for me. I had the vision of what I wanted it to be, but I had to find the right people. And then in learning to lead, I had to allow the leaders under me who were leading them to get them to do the work to that level, and give them the freedom to do that. Instead of expecting my leaders to be up here with me, I had to bring them up here so that they could bring their people up. And toward the end of my career, I finally learned that. But
yeah,
in the beginning, as a new sergeant, I think that was probably some of my worst errors,
yeah,
was the expectation I had of people. I expected 100% all the time in everything they did, and that turned a lot of people cold. It
yeah,
really did.
yeah. That's really good advice. I think really helpful for people. So as we kind of get towards the end, I did want to hear a little bit more about your work with Safe Places for Women. So can you tell a little bit about the story of how you found out about Safe Places for
Yeah,
Women, and then kind of the work that you do there. The stories are just very inspiring. So
yeah. So um, we have a virtual small group, Bible study group that we meet with on Sundays. My wife and I, and then um, 7 other people, and we're meeting. And 5 years ago, one of those people introduced me to Jamie Winship, which you know of Jamie.
mhm,
And so I was in charge of the peer support program with our department at the time, and we were going through COVID. We were going through the anti-law enforcement stuff, and there were a lot of people in the department that were just like, "Man, I'm out. I'm out. There's no
yeah,
support. Nobody wants to. Nobody supports us. Even our politicians are slinging mud at us. I just want to get out." And I'm like, "Man, we got to do something to help our people understand who they are, and it's not about all these other people. Who are they, and how do they walk in that?" And I just learned about Jamie,
yeah,
and so through a series of things, people in a small group, I said, I was thinking about seeing if Jamie would do it. And they're like, do it, do it. And I put it off and put it off and put it off. Finally, I did, and Jamie said, I would love to come do it. So he was scheduled to come out in January. We had a pretty serious officer involved shooting. And so the department said, hey, can we push that back? Because we don't have the personnel to send people to that right now.
yeah,
So we did. We pushed it out till June. Jamie came in June. I met Jamie. We talked a lot. We worked a lot together, and we developed. Jamie did some training for our peer support program, and so that that just kind of moved into him saying, "Hey, Mike, I'm doing a documentary about human trafficking. Would you want to come talk about how hard victimization is on law enforcement?"
Hmm.
And I'm like, sure. So I started working with Jamie on that, and then at the same time, my daughter met the guy who's the executive director of this new ministry that had just come into the Denver area, and it's on human trafficking. And my wife and I didn't have any inkling about human trafficking being a ministry avenue
Yeah.
for us whatsoever. And so one thing led to another. We met this couple, and we're like, wow, they're a really cool couple. So we hooked up, and I started learning about the ministry. And I said, hey, I'm retiring. If there's anything that I can do to help the ministry, he says, well, we could use somebody to do some maintenance and mow the grass.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's me. I love mowing lawns. I love grass.
Yeah.
So I started mowing the grass, and a couple of women would come out and they would bring me lemonade, and we would start talking. And then they invited my wife and I over, and we did dinner with them, and we got to know the ladies a little bit more. And yeah, we just started developing more of a relationship with them. And um, so the executive director, it's a brand new ministry. He's like, I need to start a board of directors. Would you and your wife be willing to consider that? So we became board members for a year. And then this last December, he asked me if I would be the president of the board, the director of the board, chairman of
Yeah.
the board, sorry. And so I became the chairman of the board, and we are now intimately involved in a lot of these women's lives. I just helped move another one into independent living where she's on her own. She has her own job. She's
Yeah.
graduated from the program. Another gal, I'm going to her graduation tonight. She graduated from medical assistant school, and she'll be moving out on her own soon. And that's just the ministry that we see as we bring these women in who have had such lives of hearing, some of them since they were little girls, that
Yeah.
they're of no value. The only
Yeah.
value they have are to be sex objects. That's the only value they have. And to see them gain an identity and
Mm.
gain just a whole new meaning of what their life is, and to see them overcome a lot of the obstacles that they've been on. And I'll tell a real quick story. So one gal um, she's from out of state, but she was under the influence of drugs. As we know, a lot of people in human trafficking, they're addicted to a lot of substances, and she heard somebody breaking into her apartment. She thought it was her pimp who she was trying to get away from. She got scared. She ran to her dresser. She grabbed a gun. She turned around. It was two police officers who were doing a welfare check on her. They wound up shooting her.
Yeah.
She has no animosity toward them. She found out that I was in law enforcement, retired from law enforcement, and her and I started to connect. My wife and I and her, we just started hanging out and supporting her. And she finally came to me one day and said, um, do you think those officers would forgive me
Mm.
for putting them in a position of having to shoot me?" I said, "Absolutely. I I can tell you right now, they would forgive you. You can be forgiven, and you can walk in that forgiveness."
Yeah.
And that just had another level of change in her life, knowing that what she did, she's not the same person as she was 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
She's now this new creation, and that's who she's living in right now as a whole different person.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And so that's that calling, lover of lives. That's what that looks like, right? Because
Right,
to see someone whose life has never had value,
right,
or who has believed the lie, I'm worthless or I'm not worth anything, and then to
right,
begin to breathe value and
Yep.
You know, like hold it as precious, hold the life as precious.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
And I think, Johnny, that's one of the biggest things that the vast majority of people believe is that they're not valued.
yeah,
It's either that or they're not enough.
yeah,
I'll never be enough. And we strive and strive and strive to prove that we're enough. But we can never get rid of that identity we've given ourselves, that lie that we tell ourselves is I'm not enough.
yeah,
Or all the bad things I've done in my past, that identifies who I am.
yeah,
That Jesus never said that.
yeah,
Jesus came to forgive that. I mean, if you look at the woman at the well, he didn't come to her and call her names and tell her. He drew out what she believed about herself and said, "That's not who you are. Now go tell all the other people who you know I am." And she brought those people to meet Jesus.
yeah,
And she was disregarded. She was discarded by her whole community until she found out who she really was. So,
hmm
but
yeah.
that's how a lot of us live our lives.
There's so much power in that, brother. So you know, I love to sit with the white hairs. You know, I love to sit with the brothers and the fathers and the grandfathers who have seen a lot of life, and have a lot to say. And I think there's so much of what you said, but not just what you said, but how you said it, right? That I think a person can be like, okay, this man speaks like a father. This man speaks like a lover of lives. This man speaks like a, what was the other one?
Defender,
Protector of
defender,
innocence,
defender of innocence.
defender of innocence, right? And do you have any last things that you would say for those, like I said, the people that are coming to this show, this podcast, are people who are looking to grow. They're looking to understand their true identity. They're looking to understand their design. They're trying to grow into and accept their weaknesses and have grace for their weaknesses. You know, do you have any wisdoms that you would leave?
Yeah,
You know,
I said it's going to be a lifelong search until you identify what those lies are that we believe,
hmm
and until we identify those and we change the narrative, we change those lies to what the truth is about who we are. Until you start living in the truth, you'll stay separated from who you really are. Only in truth can you come together and can you move in growth? Can you move in a new evolution of who you are?
right, man. So it's like even the woman you're talking about, she had this identity unforgiven, right? Or
Right,
you know, like there was at least a sense like I'm unforgiven or can't be forgiven.
right.
And in a moment, you know, not a moment, but there's a moment that comes when you're able to say no, forgiven. Actually, let's change that name from unforgiven to forgiven.
Right. Yeah,
And
which brings freedom.
right,
And until you experience freedom, you're not going to move up. But once you once you have that freedom, man, it's just like,
yeah,
I know a lot of business owners that are just kind of in this day
yeah,
after day, and it's the same grind. It's like, well, I'm not getting anywhere. That's because you're stuck in the old you, and you're not understanding the freedom that you have to be more. And it's not once I understand who I am, so the identity I lived in for a long time was defender of innocence, and now I'm living in the lover of lives. You know what? Tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years from now, there'll be another name that the Lord says, "This is who you are. Go live in that," and it's on up to the next elevation. It's on up to the next thing, and it just keeps getting higher and higher for you when you live in those identities. You don't have to stay stuck in this one. You know, you're going to hear a new one any day now, and that's going
yeah.
to take you to the next level.
Dude, see now that reminds me. Now what I hear in that is like the progress, right? Like you're like, oh, let's
Yeah,
go, right?
yeah,
Let's go. There's more. Let's go. It reminds me of the Narnia series in the last book of the Narnia series, the last battle, and you know Aslan is in in the new Narnia,
right,
and he's saying further up, further in, further up, further. He's calling them, and they're on this grand adventure, right? Like they're the last adventure, the everlasting adventure of their lives, and they're just running into fields of green and seeing things that they've never seen before, and beauty all around them, and whatever. And it's just further up, further in is the cry, and that one resonates with me. It motivates me, it inspires me, it shakes me up to just like, let's go, just like you're saying.
Yeah. And I want to point out, this isn't about making money. This
Yeah,
isn't about having a bigger company.
no,
Those
no,
things may come,
yeah,
they may not, but it's the freedom that you live in, and that you get to live in, and you get to move to the next thing, and you get to experience a whole new level. It may be more money, may be a bigger business, may not be, but it allows you to be more of who you are in other people's lives in this world, and that's the value you bring, is what the value you bring to this world, and continue to move forward.
man, this is so good. So I appreciate you spending the time, Mike. Everybody, this is Mike Greenwell, the lover of lies, or lover of lives, lives, not lies. This man does not love lies. He loves lives.
I like the truth.
Yep, loves the truth. Thanks for spending time with us today, and I hope you have a great day, Mike.
Thank you, John. It's been great.